How can a son laugh in the kitchen while his mother cries in the next room? How can in-laws treat a house like it already belongs to them when the owner is still very much alive? This is the night I came home early, heard them planning my future without me, and decided to answer in the only language they respect: rules, money, and paper. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Alan Ward, and I am 59 years old. People say I look older when I am tired, and that week I was very tired. I had just finished a 3-day trip to a construction site 2 hours away. I checked the beams, argued politely with suppliers, and slept in a small hotel room that smelled like dust and strong coffee. It was nothing special. I have done this kind of work my whole life. The plan was simple. Everyone at home thought I would return the next day. I changed my mind at the last minute. The last meeting finished early, and the client signed the papers without drama. I looked at the time, felt the ache in my shoulders, and thought about my own bed. I told the site manager I would head back that evening. He asked if I wanted to stay and rest. I said I wanted to go home to my wife. On the drive back, I pictured Linda in the kitchen, probably in her worn blue sweater, making tea. Maybe we would sit at the table and talk about nothing. Maybe she would tell me what new words our granddaughter Mia had learned. I thought about bringing flowers, but it was late and I just wanted to get on the road. I told myself the surprise of me coming home early would be enough. The highway was quiet. I drove in the slow lane, hands relaxed on the wheel. My back hurt a little from the hotel mattress. The radio played songs from years ago, songs Linda liked. I felt peaceful. I remember thinking that life was not perfect, but it was steady. We had a house, a business, a family. I thought those things were safe. I reached our town around 9 in the evening. The streets were almost empty. As I turned into our neighborhood, I saw more lights than usual. It took me a second to understand that several cars were parked near our driveway. I recognized Mark's car first, then Emily's small SUV. A third car, shiny and too big for the narrow street, belonged to Emily's parents, the Kents. My first thought was a simple one. I thought they were all there to greet me because I was home early. Then I remembered that they did not know I was coming. The second thought came with a small pinch in my chest. I wondered why everyone was at my house on a normal weeknight when I was supposed to be away. I parked a little down the street so the headlights would not flash directly through the living room window. Old habit from coming home late. I sat there for a moment with the engine off. The house glowed warm at the front. I could hear faint sounds, something between music and laughing, through the closed windows. It sounded like a small celebration. I took my overnight bag from the back seat and walked slowly up the path. The grass near the steps needed trimming. Usually I would notice this with a small sense of duty. That night I just noticed it and moved on. As I reached the front door, I hesitated. I thought about ringing the bell, then I felt silly. It was my house. I put the key in the lock as quietly as I could and pushed the door open. The hallway was dark except for a soft light spilling out from the living room. The air smelled like roasted chicken, wine, and a strong perfume that I knew belonged to Paula Kent. I heard laughter again, louder this time. It came from the direction of the kitchen. Voices overlapped, confident and relaxed. Then I heard something else. A small sound came from the living room, a kind of strangled breath. I turned my head and saw Linda sitting on the sofa. She was alone in the dim light, a half-empty glass of water on the coffee table in front of her. Her shoulders shook once and she pressed her fingers to her eyes. It took me a moment to realize she was crying. I put my bag down by the door and walked toward her. The floor creaked slightly under my steps. She looked up, surprise and panic mixing on her face. For a second, she did not seem to recognize me, then her lips parted and she whispered my name, but the sound was so faint it barely reached me. I sat down beside her. She tried to wipe her face quickly with the back of her hand. She said she did not expect me. She tried to smile, but her smile broke and her eyes filled again. I asked her what was wrong. She shook her head and said it was nothing, just a long day, just tired. The words sounded thin and empty. From the kitchen, someone said my name in a loud, cheerful voice, the way people call out a toast. I recognized Mark's voice. He was laughing. Another male voice, deeper, probably Gerald's, answered him with a joke. Women's voices followed, light and quick. Chairs scraped against the floor, glasses clinked. I looked at Linda. Her eyes moved toward the kitchen door and then back to me. She swallowed and said they were just talking. She said they had opened a bottle of wine with dinner. She said she would get me a plate if I wanted to eat. She kept talking like that, small practical sentences, like she was trying to build a wall with words. I put my hand gently on her arm and asked again what was wrong. This time I said it in a simple way. I told her that I had just walked in and found her crying alone while everyone else was in the kitchen laughing. I asked her if she thought I would believe that nothing was wrong. Her eyes filled again. She said it was about plans, about the future, about me and her and the house. She said Mark had invited everyone to talk while I was away because he thought I needed to start letting go. She said that they had talked for a long time and that she had felt small and outnumbered. She said they had said things about my age and my health that she did not like, but they spoke in warm voices, like they were doing us a favor. I listened. My heartbeat stayed slow and steady. My mind was still calm, the way it is on a construction site when somebody tells you a beam is cracked. You do not panic, you just look at the beam. I told her we would talk later, just the two of us. I stood up and walked toward the kitchen. The closer I came, the louder the noise grew. The kitchen was bright. The overhead light gave everything a sharp outline. When I reached the doorway, I stopped just before the threshold so they could not see me at first, but I could see them. Mark stood near the island with a glass in his hand. He looked relaxed and confident, in a shirt I had bought him years ago when he first joined the company. Gerald sat at the table, a folder open in front of him, papers neatly stacked. Paula leaned back in her chair and laughed at something Emily had said. Emily had Mia on her lap, trying to get the child to focus for a picture. They were in the middle of a conversation. Mark was saying that the timing was perfect. He said that after my last health scare, it only made sense to take control now. He said that I still owned everything on paper, but that it was better for everyone if he handled house and company decisions before, as he put it, the next surprise. Gerald agreed and said that banks and investors like to see younger names on documents. He said that people get nervous when they hear words like almost 60 and heart episode in the same sentence. He added that once certain signatures were in place, they could move fast if they wanted to sell or refinance the house. Paula said calmly that Linda would be happier in a smaller place, closer to town and closer to services. She used the word facility in a smooth way, like it was just another piece of furniture. She said that when the house was in Mark's name, they could explore all kinds of options. Emily said it would be easier for Mia when all the families were aligned. She said she did not want confusion about who was in charge of the business and the house. She said that once Mark had everything under his control, they could make plans for new cars, school funds, maybe even a holiday home. Then Mark laughed and said that I would not argue. He said I trusted him with everything because I did not really understand the paperwork anyway. He said that I was old school and that I signed what people put in front of me as long as they told me it was good for the family. He said it like it was a sweet joke. I stood there and listened to my own son speak about me as if I were some confused old neighbor who needed guidance. I felt something clean and clear move into place inside my chest. It was not sharp anger. It was closer to a straight line drawn on a page. A decision, but not yet a detailed one. I stepped into the doorway. The movement caught Emily's eye first. She turned her head and froze. Her smile fell. Then she looked at Mark. He followed her gaze and saw me. For a second, he looked like the young boy who had once broken a window with a ball and waited for my reaction. Then he tried to recover and lifted his glass a little, as if greeting me at a party. I put my overnight bag down on the floor beside the doorway. The sound of it touching the tiles was soft, but in that moment it felt louder than all their laughter. The room went quiet. Even Mia, who rarely stopped talking, fell silent and laid her head against her mother. I looked at each of them, one by one, and then I spoke. I told them that I had come home early. I told them that I had walked through my own front door and found my wife in the living room, crying alone in the half-dark. I told them that 3 steps later, I had stood in this doorway and listened to them make plans for my house, my health, my future, and my company, as if I was not alive and standing 10 feet away. I said that the house was still mine. I said that the company was still mine. I said that nobody would be moving me or Linda anywhere against our will. I added that anyone who wanted to discuss my age, my heart, or my mind needed to do it while looking at my face, not at a folder. As I finished, I saw the change in Mark's expression. The casual smile vanished. His jaw tightened. His hand lowered slightly, the glass hanging awkwardly. For the first time in a long time, he looked unsure, like the ground under him had shifted a little. In that small, bright kitchen, with my travel bag at my feet and the smell of leftover chicken in the air, I realized something simple. They thought I was easy to move. They thought I was already halfway out of my own life. They were wrong. After I spoke in the kitchen, there was a long moment when nobody moved. The only sound was the refrigerator humming and a cartoon song from the tablet on the counter. Mark looked at me like he was trying to decide if this was just one of my rare bursts of emotion, something he could smooth over with a joke. Gerald shifted in his chair and closed the folder slowly, like he wanted to hide it without drawing attention. Emily said in a careful voice that they had only been talking, that nothing was final. that everyone was worried about me and wanted to make life easier. Paula added that they were trying to be responsible and that this was how modern families handled aging and business. Mark finally said that I had misunderstood. He said that they were not taking anything away, they were just planning. Linda had come to the kitchen doorway by then. Her eyes were still red. She stood behind me, twisting a tissue in her hand. I could feel that she wanted to move between us, to calm things down, to say that we should all sit and talk. I did not let the silence stretch too long. I told them that I was tired from the trip and that I did not want to continue this conversation that night. I said that we would revisit everything later, calmly and with all documents on the table. Then I told them to enjoy their evening and that I was going to bed. Mark looked like he wanted to argue, but Emily put a hand on his arm. Gerald and Paula gave each other a quick look. They did not apologize for anything. They did not even look embarrassed. They looked annoyed that their plan had been interrupted. I walked out of the kitchen with Linda beside me. We went to our bedroom without another word. That night I lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling. Linda lay on her side, her back to me, breathing unevenly. I knew she was not asleep. I did not speak. I thought back over the last few years, over all the small moments that had led to this big one. The pattern was clear now, like a drawing I had refused to look at straight. It had not always been like this with Mark. When he was small, he followed me everywhere. I would come home from a site with dust on my boots, and he would ask what I had built that day. He liked the smell of fresh wood and wet cement. On weekends, if I went to check a job, he begged to come. I still remember his small hand in mine as we walked around half-finished houses. Back then, he used to say that he wanted to work with me when he grew up. I built the company slowly. First, it was just me and 2 workers, an old truck, and a notebook full of numbers. I took any job I could. Fences, sheds, small repairs, then small houses, then bigger ones. I handled contracts myself, sitting at the kitchen table with a calculator and a pen. I made mistakes and learned from them. I never made the same mistake twice. When Mark was a teenager, I showed him how to read a simple contract. He seemed interested, but also distracted. His eyes were more on his phone than on the paper. When he left for university, I was proud. He would be the first in our family with a degree. He chose business and management. I thought that this was perfect. I imagined that he would come back full of new ideas and help me grow the company in ways I could not even see. Linda was excited too. She said that together, Mark and I would be a strong team. At university, he met Emily. The first time he brought her home, he looked different. He stood a little straighter, dressed a little sharper. Emily was charming and quick with compliments. She said that the house was cozy, that the garden had so much potential, that the company must be such a big responsibility. Her words sounded kind, but they floated above us like balloons, pretty but light. She talked about her parents a lot. Gerald had been in finance, she said. Paula knew about property and strategy. They lived across town in a neat house with white walls and new furniture. When we went there for dinner the first time, I noticed the difference at once. Everything smelled like new fabric and strong scented candles. There were no old marks on the walls, no scratches on the table from years of family meals. Gerald asked a lot of questions about my company. He asked about revenue, profit, loans, insurance. His tone was friendly, but his eyes were measuring. When I answered, he nodded and said that it was solid for a traditional outfit, in a way that sounded both like praise and like a quiet insult. He said that with some modern thinking, things could be scaled. I did not ask him to explain. I had seen enough rushed projects and failed expansions in my life to know that scale was not always a gift. Over time, I saw the way Mark changed when he was around the Kents. Alone with me at the site, he was still my son, asking about materials and schedules. With them, he suddenly talked like a young executive. He used big phrases he had heard in lectures. He talked about leveraging assets and unlocking value. When I suggested we focus on finishing the current contracts well instead of chasing new ones, he smiled the kind of smile people use on children. He said that I was cautious, which he framed as a nice way of saying old-fashioned. When Linda had a small health scare a few years back, things shifted again. She had felt a pressure in her chest and shortness of breath. We went to the hospital. I remember sitting in the waiting room under bright lights, listening to plastic chairs squeak and wheels roll by. I kept my hands still in my lap because I did not want them to shake. In the end, it was not as serious as we feared, but it left a mark on both of us. After that, Paula started to talk more about planning ahead whenever we met. She said that none of us were getting younger. She said that her own parents had done the paperwork early, so there was no confusion later. She talked about power of attorney, about living arrangements, about what would happen when one of you cannot decide for yourself. She said these things with a gentle smile, but every time she said, "one of you," her eyes moved in my direction. I brushed it off at first. I told myself she was just one of those people who like to plan. I did not want to see more in it. Linda was uncomfortable, but she tried to be polite. Mark started to repeat some of Paula's phrases when he visited. He said that it was best to move legal control early while everyone was still calm. He said that banks preferred younger names on documents. He said that we should not think of it as losing anything, but as streamlining. Then Mia was born, and a new layer was added. She was small and loud and perfect. When I first held her, I felt every long hour I had ever worked shift into a different shape. The company, the house, the savings, all of it suddenly had a clear reason. I wanted her to have security and choice. I wanted her to grow up with memories of this house, this garden, this family around her. The first years were good. Linda and I babysat often. Mark and Emily were tired and new to parenting, and they were grateful for help. We would take Mia to the park, feed her in our kitchen, sing old songs to her. She liked to follow me outside and watch me fix small things. She liked to sit on the front step with a toy hammer and copy my movements. But even then, I saw small changes. When the Kents were present, decisions about Mia shifted toward them. They had opinions on everything: food, clothes, school plans, even when she was still in diapers. They spoke as if they knew what was best because their own life looked more polished. When I suggested something simple, like less screen time or more time outside, they treated it as cute, like an old story from another age. Over dinners at their house, they would talk about future schools, about special programs, about how far they could push Mia. They did not ask what I thought. They asked what Mark and Emily thought, and they pushed those answers toward their own ideas. I noticed that when Mia drew pictures, she now drew her other grandparents' house more often than ours. This was natural in some ways. Children draw what they see, but it still stung. At the company, Mark had started to work full-time after university. I made him a manager. It was not automatic. I wanted him to earn it. For a while, he did work hard. He came early, stayed late, learned how to deal with workers and clients. But as time passed, I noticed he preferred the office to the site. He liked meetings and presentations more than walking through mud and measuring with a tape. He began to talk about expanding, taking out larger loans, buying new land. I was cautious. I had seen economic cycles. I knew how quickly a company could choke on debt if the wrong job went wrong at the wrong time. When I pulled back from some of his ideas, he went to Gerald for advice. Gerald encouraged him. He told him that men who did not expand fast enough were simply afraid. Mark started to see my caution as fear rather than experience. Slowly, respect in rooms began to tilt. Clients who knew me well still looked to me when serious questions came up. But younger clients, especially those who liked big talk, gravitated to Mark. He was quick with confident answers. Sometimes he promised things before checking with me. When I later corrected the timeline or the cost, he would sigh in front of them and say that I liked to double-check everything. It sounded harmless, but it put me in a corner. I noticed other small things. When we all met at an upscale restaurant for Mark and Emily's anniversary, the Kents chose the place. The menu was full of dishes with names I did not recognize. At the table, Gerald raised his glass and talked about the future of our joined families. He said that the real test of a modern man was how he handed over control to the next generation. He used my name once in a sentence that suggested I had done my part, and that now it was time to relax and let Mark lead. Everyone looked at Mark when he spoke like that, not at me. Linda squeezed my hand under the table and stared at her plate. Later, in the car, she said that she did not like how Gerald spoke to me. She said that it sounded like he was giving a speech at a retirement party. I told her that it was just words, that I was still in charge of my own life. I believed it then, or I wanted to. The truth is, I helped make this pattern. I let small things slide because I did not want fights. I told myself that Mark was under pressure, that Emily wanted to please her parents, that the Kents meant well in their own way. I worked, I provided, I tried to stay in the background at social events because I was more comfortable with building materials than with wine lists. So when I lay on my bed that night after coming home from the trip, I could not pretend that the scene in the kitchen had come from nowhere. It was the natural result of many evenings, many dinners, many times when I had stepped back to keep the peace. I had thought that my quiet work and steady presence were enough to keep respect alive. I had been wrong about that. I turned my head and looked at the familiar shape of the wardrobe, the old chair in the corner, the pile of clothes on the chair that Linda always meant to fold. This house held every year of our life together. I remembered painting the walls when we first moved in, building the shelves in the living room, digging the small flower bed outside. I remembered Mark's first steps on this hallway floor. In the kitchen earlier, when I heard my son talk about me as if I were an obstacle to be moved out of the way, something inside me had settled. The feeling stayed as I lay there. It was not loud. It did not shout. It was just a steady thought. I would not let other people decide where I lived or what happened to what I had built. I had been patient for a long time. Now I needed to be precise. The next morning, the house felt strangely quiet. The extra cars were gone. The kitchen table was still messy from the night before. There were plates with crumbs, an empty wine bottle, a napkin with Mia's drawings on it. Someone had left the folder from the kitchen talk closed and tucked under a placemat like it was something ordinary. Linda moved around the kitchen slowly, cleaning up. She did not hum like she usually did. Her movements were small and careful. I made coffee and watched her. For a while, we did not speak about what had happened. We talked about my trip, about the weather, about how Mia had learned a new song. The normal words felt thin, like paper over a crack. After a few minutes, I asked her again what they had said before I came home. This time, she did not try to protect anyone. She sat down at the table, folded her hands, and looked at the surface for a long second before she answered. She said that Mark had told them it was time to make things official. He had said that my last health scare and my age made it risky for the house and the company to stay the way they were. Linda said that they used calm voices and smiled a lot. They spoke as if they were doing her a favor. They said that if everything was signed now, there would be no stress later. They said that she would not have to worry if something happened to me. They said that Mark would handle everything and that she could just rest. She told me that she had asked a simple question. She had asked what would happen to her if Mark decided to sell the house or change the company. She said that the answer she received was vague. They spoke about trusts and shares and family understanding, but no one gave a clear guarantee. She said she had understood one thing very clearly. Once she and I signed, we would not be the ones in control. I listened and felt a slow heat in my chest, but my voice stayed even. I asked her why she had been crying when I came in. She said that at some point the talk had moved from planning to pressure. She said that Mark had told her I could be stubborn and that it would help if she supported the plan. He had reminded her of my age. He had reminded her of the night in the hospital waiting room. He had asked her if she really wanted to go through that again without clear papers. Linda said that she had tried to stand up for me. She had said that I was not helpless, that I still ran the company, that I could understand documents. Gerald had replied that it was not about intelligence, it was about efficiency. She said that Paula had taken her hand and told her not to be emotional, that this was just practical. As she spoke, I saw again in my mind the scene in the kitchen, their relaxed faces, their easy laughter when they thought I was gone. Now I saw the scene in the living room before that, Linda alone with her water glass. The two images fit together like pieces of a puzzle. I felt the line inside me draw itself a little darker. Later that day, Mark sent me a message. He wrote that he hoped I was feeling better and that the talk last night had come from a place of love. He suggested that we meet the following week for a more formal family planning session. He wrote that he would bring clearer versions of the documents with everything laid out in simple language. He added that there was no reason to delay and that it was better to sign while everyone was calm. I replied that I would be there, but that I would not sign anything without reading it fully and letting someone I trusted see it. I did not add any anger to the words. I kept them as plain as possible. A few days later they came again, this time for a smaller meeting. We sat in the living room. Mark placed a folder on the coffee table with a little flourish, as if he was presenting something valuable. Gerald and Paula sat on the couch opposite us. Emily sat near Linda, talking to her in a soothing tone about how this was just a formality. Mark began to explain the documents. He said that the first one would give him joint control over the house and the company. He said it would allow him to act quickly if there was an emergency. He repeated that I would not lose anything in practice because he would always listen to us. He said that this was about trust and making life easier. Gerald added that banks liked clear lines. He said that with my name alone on everything, lenders might get nervous. He said that if we wanted to unlock value from the house or the company, it would be faster with Mark's name on top. He smiled as he spoke, like a teacher explaining a simple lesson to a slow student. Paula spoke to Linda again about comfort. She said that once the house was in Mark's name, they could consider moving us to a smaller place near town. She said that this would be easier to maintain, that I would not need to worry about stairs or garden work. She said that Mark would then be able to use the house more efficiently. She did not seem to notice that every time she spoke about what would be easier for us, she also spoke about what would be more useful for them. I looked at the papers but did not touch them. I asked Mark to explain what would stop him from selling the house if he decided he needed the money. He said that he would never do that. I repeated my question, this time asking what in the document itself would stop him. He hesitated, then said that the documents were based on trust, not on suspicion. I asked about the company shares. I asked what would happen if there was a disagreement between us. I asked who would have the deciding vote. Gerald answered this time. He said that in any modern structure, the younger manager usually took the lead. He said it was more dynamic. The word he chose meant that I would lose my final say. My voice stayed calm. I said that I was not against planning. I said that I knew better than most people that life could change in one day. I said that I had worked my whole life so my family would not stand in a bank office one day with no options. But I also said that I was not ready to sign a paper that made me a guest in my own house and a visitor in my own company. Mark's jaw tightened. He said that I was being dramatic. He said that I was letting my pride get in the way of common sense. He said that I should be happy to rest and let him handle the hard parts. Emily nodded along and said that this was what good sons did, that they stepped up. I told them I had heard enough for that day. I said I would take a copy of the papers, read them in my own time, and ask someone who understood my life and my history to explain any parts that were not clear. I did not ask their permission. I simply said it and reached for the folder. For a moment, Mark looked like he might refuse. Then he forced a smile and agreed in a tight voice. Gerald watched me closely as I slid the papers into a plain envelope from our own desk. Paula gave Linda one more soft look, the kind that says one person is reasonable and the other is stubborn. Then they all stood up and said that it was good we were talking at least. After they left, the house felt empty again. Linda sat down heavily in her chair. She asked in a quiet voice if I was angry with her. I told her no. I said that she had been put in a hard position and that she had tried to protect both sides. I said that my problem was not with her. I said that my problem was with the way our son had started to see me. That evening, when Linda went to bed, I went to my small home office at the end of the hallway. The room smelled faintly of paper and old wood. The desk was scratched in places. The window looked out over the side yard where I had once built a simple wooden swing for Mark when he was little. In the corner, under the lower shelf, there was a small metal box. It was not hidden, but it was not in plain view either. I had put important things in there years ago and then almost forgotten about it in daily life. I took the key from the drawer, bent down, and opened the box. Inside were old deeds, the original papers from the day we bought the house. The edges were yellowed. There were also the founding documents of the company, with my name written over and over in careful letters. I saw the old bank release letter from the day we finally paid off the first big loan. Holding those papers, I could feel again the weight of the work they represented. At the bottom of the box was a thicker folder with my name on the front in Tom's handwriting. Tom was an old friend who had become a lawyer. Years ago, after Linda's health scare, he had insisted that we sit down and plan. He had explained to me, slowly and in simple terms, how trusts and wills and powers of attorney worked. He had drawn diagrams on legal pads until I understood. Back then, I had signed some basic documents with him. We had set up a simple structure that protected the house and some savings. He had told me that we could change it later if needed. Life became busy again, and I had not thought much about those papers since. I opened the folder now and read. The legal language was dry, but I could follow it with patience. It said that the house was in both my name and Linda's. It described how, in certain conditions, parts of our estate could go directly to future grandchildren, not only through our son. It described my role as trustee and how any changes would require my active decision, not someone else's pressure. I realized slowly that I already had more protection than Mark and the Kents understood. The documents in Tom's folder were not perfect, but they were solid. They gave me room to act. They gave me options. They proved that this house and this company were not as easy to move as a glass on a table. I placed Tom's folder on top of the envelope that held the new papers from Gerald and Mark's advisor. 2 sets of plans sat before me, one made years ago with someone who knew me, and one made recently by people who saw me as a problem to solve. I saw the contrast clearly. I did not know yet exactly what I would do. But I knew one thing: I would not walk into any room again and let other people hand me pens and speak about my life as if I were not present. I would bring my own papers, I would bring my own pen, and I would decide where my signature went. The next morning I called Tom. It was early, but I knew he usually went into his office before most people. He liked quiet mornings with paper and coffee. When he picked up, his voice was rough with sleep, then it brightened when he heard my name. I told him I had some documents I needed him to look at. I kept my tone light, but he has known me for a long time. He heard something under the words. He asked if everything was all right. I said that nothing was on fire, but that people were trying to move things around me while talking as if I was already gone. There was a short pause. Then he said that if I could come by before noon, he would make time. I agreed and told him I would bring both his old folder and the new papers Mark had given me. On the drive to Tom's office, I brought the 2 envelopes with me on the passenger seat. They slid a little with each turn. I kept glancing at them, as if they were living things. One held my past planning, the other held someone else's idea of my future. It felt strange to think that a few sheets of paper could shift a whole life, but I knew they could. Tom's office was in a modest building near the center of town. The carpet in the hallway was worn at the corners, but clean. His name was on a brass plate on the door. When I stepped in, I smelled coffee and paper and the faint scent of old books. The receptionist smiled and told me to go right in, since he was expecting me. He stood up from behind his desk as I entered and came around to shake my hand. He looked a little older than when I had last seen him, more gray at the temples, but his eyes were still sharp. He asked again if I was all right. I said I was, then I sat down and placed both envelopes between us on the desk. I handed him the one with his handwriting first. He opened it and looked through the papers he had prepared years before. He nodded a little as he read, like a craftsman checking his own work. Then I pushed the second envelope toward him, the one that held the new family plan. He took out the documents and began to read. The room was quiet for a while. I listened to the sound of pages turning. Outside the window, traffic hummed. Tom's face shifted as he read. His mouth pressed into a flat line more than once. After some minutes, he put the papers down and looked at me. He said, in a very calm tone, that the new documents would give Mark broad power over my house, my company, and even decisions about my care if I was ever unwell. He pointed to sections that allowed Mark to sign on my behalf, to move assets, to borrow against the house. He said that Linda's position in those papers was weak, almost symbolic. Then he tapped the older papers. He reminded me of what we had done back then. He said that we had already placed some protections on the house and savings. He pointed to a part that allowed us to direct things toward future grandchildren under certain conditions. He explained again that as trustee, I still had the main say. He said that the new papers, if signed, would push aside much of that work. I asked him, as simply as I could, if there was any good reason for me to sign what Mark and the Kents wanted. Tom shook his head. He said that planning was good, but that these documents were not planning, they were transfer. He said that if I signed them, I would be handing away the tools I had to protect myself and Linda. He did not use dramatic words. He just laid out the facts, line by line. He asked me what Mark had said to convince me. I told him about the scene in the kitchen, the talk about my age and my health, the way they had spoken about moving us to a smaller place like it was already decided. I told him about the laughter over the idea that I did not understand paperwork. Tom listened without interrupting, his eyes steady on mine. When I finished, he sighed. He said that this was not the first time he had seen grown children try to move parents aside like this. He said it was always wrapped in words like love and care and safety. He asked me what I wanted. Not what they wanted, not what would cause the least noise in the short term. What I wanted. I sat back and thought for a moment. I said that I did not want to fight just to fight. I said that I did not want to cut Mark out of everything. I said that I wanted to be respected in my own house, in my own company, and in my own old age. I said that I wanted Linda safe. I said that I wanted Mia to have something real one day, not just stories. Tom nodded and said that those were clear wishes, and that clear wishes could be turned into clear documents if we acted carefully. He suggested that we review and update the old plan, not tear it up. He said we could design things so that my house and a significant part of my savings would be held in a way that could not easily be taken or used without my agreement. He also said that we could write conditions based on behavior for how and when certain people could benefit. He did not push me. He simply laid the options in front of me like different tools. He told me to think on it for a day if I wanted. I looked at the papers again. I thought about Linda on the sofa, about Mark in my kitchen, about Mia on Emily's lap. The line in my chest felt straight and firm. I told him I did not need a day. I said I wanted to update the plan. I said I wanted to keep control while I was alive and clear in mind, and I wanted any transfer after that to depend on respect, not just blood. I said I would not sign anything Gerald had put together. Tom gave a small smile, the kind that does not reach the eyes but shows agreement. He said we would start at once. For the next hour, we went through the old documents slowly. He made notes on a pad. We talked about the house, the company, the savings. We talked about possible future health issues, about Linda's needs if I became weak, about what role, if any, Mark should have in decisions. Tom reminded me that the law did not care about family moods. It cared about what was written and signed. When I left his office, the sky outside was brighter than when I had arrived. I felt tired, but it was a different kind of tired than after a long day on a site. My shoulders felt heavy, but my steps were steady. I had not solved everything in one morning, but I had taken the first real step. I was no longer just reacting to their plans. I was building my own structure. From there, I went to the company office. It was on the edge of town, near a small industrial area. The building was not pretty, but it was ours. The sign with our name on it was a little faded, but still solid. Inside, the reception area had a fresh coat of paint from last year. I greeted the staff, made a small joke about being back early, and went straight to my office. On the shelf behind my desk was a row of folders with employment contracts. I pulled out Mark's. I had read parts of it when he joined, but not in detail for a long time. Now I sat down and went through every page. The contract gave him a manager title and a clear salary. It gave him some benefits, but it did not give him ownership. It did not promise him the top position forever. It set out expectations and a review process, like any other contract. I also pulled out the founding company documents again, this time from a separate cabinet. They confirmed what I already knew. I was the majority owner. There was no automatic path that made Mark my successor. If I wanted him there, I could make that choice. If I decided that his behavior no longer fit what the company needed, I had the power to change his role. As I read, I felt a calm confidence grow. For years I had treated Mark as if his place in the company was fixed, like the sun rising. In reality, it was based on my choice and on his actions. He had started to act like everything was already his. The papers told a different story. I did not take any dramatic action that day. I did not call him in and confront him. I simply made copies of the key pages and placed them in a new folder. On the front, I wrote in simple letters, Company, Ownership, and Roles. I put that folder next to Tom's in my bag. On my way home, I stopped at the bank. Nina, the branch manager, had known our family for years. She had helped me through good times and hard times, always with clear explanations. I asked if she had a few minutes. She did. We sat in her glass-walled office with a view of the lobby. I told her that I wanted to review how the house and the company were tied to any loans. I did not give her every detail about the family tension. I just said that I wanted to know exactly how things stood. She pulled up the records on her screen and turned it slightly so I could see. She explained that the main house loan had been paid off years ago. There were no active liens on the property. The company had a credit line, but it was based mostly on my personal guarantee and the company's history, not on Mark. His name appeared on some documents as a contact person, but not as the main guarantor. I asked her what would happen if someone like Mark tried to take out a new loan using the house or the company as security. She said that the bank would require my agreement as long as I held ownership, and the trust remained as it was. She added that if we changed the structure, we would have to sign new documents at the bank too. I felt another quiet piece of the puzzle click into place. The picture that Mark and the Kents had painted, of banks already nervous because of my age, was not true in the way they said. There were concerns any bank would have, but I was not some weak link they needed to remove. I was the anchor. Before I left, Nina asked if everything was all right. I told her that I was just checking things before making any changes, the same way I checked a building before adding a new floor. She liked that comparison. She said that if I planned to adjust the trust or my guarantees, it would be better to inform the bank in advance so they could prepare the right forms. I told her I would. That evening, at home, I sat in the kitchen with my phone. Linda was in the living room, watching a show without really seeing it. From the kitchen, I could see the glow of the screen on her face. I opened the family message group. I scrolled up through recent months. There they were, the little signs in written form. Mark joking about finally getting the old man to sign. Gerald sending a picture of a large house in an online listing with a note that said, "When the assets are aligned, something like this is possible." Paula sending links about modern living for older couples and saying that big houses were wasted on people our age. Emily writing that once the company was restructured, everyone could breathe easier. I took screenshots of the messages that showed their attitude clearly. Not one or two. Many. I did not plan to use them to embarrass anyone in public. I just wanted a record of their own words, with dates and times. I stored the images in a separate folder on my phone, then backed them up to my computer in my office. By the time I finished, it was late. The house was quiet. I went to my small office again and placed all the new materials together. Tom's folder with notes for updates, the copies of the company documents, the printed screenshots of messages, the summary I had written of my talk with Nina. I put them in a larger binder and wrote one simple word on the spine. Control. I ran my hand along the edge of the binder. It did not solve everything, but it was something I understood. A set of facts, arranged in order, ready to be used. For most of my life, I had built houses and offices for other people. Now, slowly, I was building a different kind of structure for myself. The next days moved in a slow, steady line. On the surface, life looked normal. I went to the office, visited sites, checked invoices. Linda cooked, folded laundry, watched shows in the evening. Mark sent some work emails and a few short messages about upcoming projects. The family group chat buzzed now and then with photos of Mia or links from Paula about healthy living after 50. Underneath, something else was forming. I kept the binder labeled Control on the lower shelf of my office within easy reach, but not in plain view. Every night after Linda went to bed, I took it out and read a little. I added dates, small notes, questions for Tom. I wrote in simple language so that if I looked back in a year, I would still understand my own thinking. A few days later, Tom called me. He said that he had worked through the notes and had prepared updated documents. He told me that he had made them as clear as possible, with simple summaries attached. He asked when I could come in. I told him I would be there the next afternoon. When I sat down in his office again, he had several neat piles of paper on the desk. Each pile had a sticky note on top with one word: house, company, care, future. He did not start with a speech. He simply picked up the first pile and walked me through it. He explained that the updated plan would keep active control of the house in my hands while I was able to decide. He showed me how, under those papers, nobody could sell or move the house without my clear written agreement. He also showed me a section that would, in the future, direct the value of the house and a part of our savings toward Mia, but in a way that did not pass through Mark's direct control. He explained the company documents next. He reminded me that I was already the main owner, but he added a new layer. He had drafted a formal structure that separated ownership from management. In simple words, it said that I could appoint or remove managers based on set reasons. It also spelled out that no manager, not even a family member, could promise company assets as if they were personal property. For care, he had taken our old instructions and strengthened them. He wrote it so that if I was ever weak in body but still clear in mind, I would keep deciding for myself. Only if I truly could not decide would others step in, and even then, Linda would come before Mark. For the future file, he had written options. Some were about what would happen after my life. Others were about what could be changed while I was still here. He used simple words, but careful structure. He said that the law liked clear steps. He wanted to give me those steps. I read each section slowly while he waited. When I did not understand a line, I asked him to explain. He did, with patience and small examples. By the time we reached the end, I felt tired but not confused. It was like walking a long sight from one edge to the other. You feel it in your legs, but you know where you have been. Tom said that we could sign now and file, or I could take the documents home and think. I sat back and looked at the papers one more time. I thought of Mark's folder on my coffee table, the one he had presented with such confidence. I compared that image with Tom's quiet piles, each labeled, each explained. I told Tom that I did not need more time. I said that I had been thinking for weeks, even months, without giving it a name. I said that these papers matched what I wanted: safety without chains, help without surrender. He nodded and called in his assistant as a witness. We signed page after page. My hand moved slowly but firmly. Each signature felt like the placing of a small beam in a frame. Alone, each one might not seem like much. Together, they formed something that could carry weight. When it was done, Tom gathered the signed sets and said he would file what needed to be filed with the right offices. He handed me my copies in a new folder. It felt thicker than the old one, heavier in my hands. He told me to keep it safe and to let him know before I shared any details with anyone else. As I left his office, I did not feel triumphant. I felt prepared. For the first time in a long time, I knew, on paper, and in fact, where I stood. The next step was the notary office. Tom had set up an appointment for me the following day. The building was near the courthouse, all pale walls and hard floors. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of toner ink. I sat in a waiting area with a few other people clutching their own papers. Some looked nervous, some looked bored. When my name was called, I went into a simple room with a large table. The notary checked my identification and laid out the key documents Tom had sent ahead. She spoke very little, only enough to confirm that I understood I was signing of my own free will. I answered that I did. The process was steady and quiet, nothing dramatic. But I knew that each stamp she pressed on the pages gave them a kind of power that no raised voice or family argument could match. After that came another visit to the bank. I made an appointment with Nina this time. When I sat down in her office, I placed Tom's new folder on the table. I did not show her everything, but I explained that we had updated our plan and that this would, in time, touch the way the house and the company were seen by the bank. She listened carefully and asked simple, direct questions. She confirmed again that the house had no active debt. She asked if any new names would be added to the title. I told her they would not. She asked if my personal guarantee for the company's credit line would change. I told her that for now it would remain, but that I wanted it written clearly that no new large loan could be tied to the company without my express signature. She nodded and said that this was normal and sensible. She said she would add a note to the file so that any future request involving our accounts would trigger a direct check with me. She made copies of the parts of Tom's documents that affected the bank and slid them into a labeled folder behind her desk. When I left the bank, I felt another layer settle into place. The picture was becoming clear. In the eyes of the law, in the eyes of the bank, I was not a man to be moved silently into a smaller space while others signed on his behalf. I was, in simple terms, the one who said yes or no. At home, Linda watched me as I carried the new folder into my office. That evening, after dinner, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and asked me to tell her, in plain words, what I had done. I pulled the chair closer and took my time. I did not bury her in terms. I told her that I had made sure nobody could sell the house from under us. I told her that I had made sure our care would be decided by us first, by people who truly knew us, not by someone who thought of us as a problem. I told her that I had looked at the company papers and the bank records and made sure we were not exposed to plans that were not ours. Her eyes filled as she listened, or she said that she felt guilty because she had sat at that living room meeting and let them talk. I told her that she had been outnumbered and that guilt was not useful. I said that what mattered was what we did now. She asked what would happen with Mark. I told her the truth. I said that I did not plan to cut him out of my life or from everything I owned. I said that I had, however, changed the conditions. I said that from now on, any benefit would follow respect, not assumptions. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded and said that this felt fair. In the middle of all this, life outside our house continued. At work, Mark acted as if nothing had changed. He came and went, held meetings, sent emails. But I watched him more closely now. I listened to the way he spoke to clients and to staff. I saw how often he referred to our company in a way that suggested he and I were already equal in every sense. One afternoon, I called him into my office. I did not mention lawyers or trusts. I kept the talk focused on the business. I told him that as the company grew more complex, we needed clearer roles. I said that titles mattered less than functions, but that we had to be exact. I laid out a formal description of his position, which Tom had helped me write. It described him as a manager with specific areas of responsibility. It also contained a standard review schedule, like any serious job. I told him this was to protect both him and the company. I said that this was how professional firms worked, even when families were involved. He frowned and asked if I did not trust him. I answered that trust and structure were not enemies. I said that the future of the company could not rest on vague ideas and family habits. It needed clear lines. I did not argue when he said that this felt like a step backward. I simply told him that every person in the company, including him, now had written expectations. He left my office without slamming the door, but his shoulders were stiff. I watched him walk down the corridor and felt a strange mix of sadness and calm. I knew he would go home and talk about this with Emily and her parents. I knew they would not like it. But I also knew that, this time, I had not left any empty spaces for them to fill with their own stories. A week later, Emily created an online invitation for Mia's birthday party. It popped up on my phone one evening. The event was set for the community center hall. The message was written in a cheerful tone. She wrote that there would be cake, balloons, games, and that it would be the perfect time for family to talk about the next chapter. Under that line, there was a note just for me and Linda. It said that Mark hoped I would say a few words at the party about the future of the family and the company. She added a small smiley face, as if this was a casual request. I stared at the message for a long time. It was clear they still believed that the party would be their stage. They expected me to stand up, praise them, and perhaps finally agree to their plan. They did not know that another plan already existed on paper, in offices they did not control. I accepted the invitation with a short reply. I wrote that we would be there and that I would speak when the time was right. Linda read over my shoulder and put her hand on my arm. She did not ask what I would say. She did not need to. She could see in my face that whatever happened at that party, I would not stand there as a man waiting for other people's decisions. In the days before the party, I checked details the way I would before a large job. I confirmed with Tom that all the necessary filings and registrations were in motion. I checked with Nina that the notes were in the bank system. I made sure my copies of the key documents were in order and easy to reach. I did not plan to wave papers around in front of children and balloons, but I wanted to know that, behind my simple words, there would be a hard frame of fact, signed pages, stamped forms, recorded notes. I wanted to stand in that hall knowing that, whatever anyone said or tried, the ground under my feet was firm. On the morning of the party, I woke before the alarm. The sky was pale and clear. Linda laid out a simple shirt and jacket for me. The ones she said made me look steady, her word for when I felt most myself. We wrapped Mia's gift, a small wooden tool set with her name carved into the handle of the hammer. I had made it in the garage in the evenings when nobody was watching. As we drove to the community center, Linda held the gift on her lap. She stared out the window, lost in thought. I kept my hands relaxed on the wheel. The building came into view, a low, wide structure with big glass doors and colored banners flapping in the breeze. The parking lot was already busy. I recognized the Kent's big car near the entrance. I parked a little further away and turned off the engine. For a moment, we sat in silence. I could hear faint music from inside and bursts of children's laughter as the doors opened and closed. I reached into the back seat and took out a slim folder. Not the full binder, just a selection of pages I might need. I slipped it under my arm. Linda looked at me. I met her eyes and gave a small nod. We stepped out of the car and walked toward the doors, carrying the gift and the quiet weight of everything that had been set in place. The hall was bright and loud when we walked in. Balloons floated near the ceiling, and a long table held cakes and paper plates. Children ran in circles with party hats slipping over their eyes. I saw Mia near the front, wearing a small crown, her cheeks sticky with frosting. She waved when she saw us and ran over to hug Linda's legs. Near the small stage, the Kents stood with Mark and Emily. They were all dressed neatly, glasses in their hands, talking with easy smiles. When Mark noticed me, he came over and greeted me like we had no unfinished business. He thanked us for coming and said that he hoped I was ready to say a few words later. I said that I was. I saw Tom sitting at a back table, just as we had agreed. He did not wave or draw attention to himself. He just nodded once when our eyes met. Yet, a thin folder rested on the chair beside him. The party moved on. There were games, songs, and a small show where Mia tried to blow out candles and needed help. Everyone laughed and clapped. For a while, I simply watched her. Whatever else happened, this small person was the reason I had worked so hard. After the cake, Paula tapped her glass with a spoon and asked the room to quiet down. She said that it would be nice if I spoke about the future of the family. She smiled toward me as if she had given me a kind gift. I walked to the little microphone stand. My heart beat slowly, my hands were steady. I thanked everyone for coming for Mia. I said that she was the center of this day, and that everything else was just structure around her. Then I said that some people had talked lately as if I was already gone from my own life. I said that they had made plans for my house and my company in other rooms, in other voices. I said that I had listened, and then I had done something simple. I had gone to the places they respected most, to the lawyer and the bank, and I had written my own plans. I told the room that the house now sat in a trust where Mia was the future main beneficiary, and that until then, only Linda and I would decide who lived there. I said that any idea of moving us to a small place for our own good, without our clear agreement, was now impossible in law, not just in talk. I said that the company remained under my control and that no one, not even family, could sign on its behalf or use it as a personal wallet without my written consent. I added that some roles inside the company had been corrected to match this reality and that written notices had already been prepared. As I finished, Tom rose from his chair and walked forward. He placed sealed envelopes in front of Mark and Emily and one in front of the Kents. He said quietly that these held the formal notices and that they had already been filed where it mattered. Mark opened his envelope. I watched his eyes move over the words that told him his new position in the company, his lack of control over the house, the conditions tied to any future benefit. The color in his face changed. He looked up at me, then around the room, as if searching for someone to explain how this could be happening at a child's party. The room had gone silent. Even the children seemed to sense something. Mia tugged at Mark's sleeve and asked why everyone had stopped talking. He did not answer. He just stood there, holding the letter in one hand and the empty air in the other, while Linda and I turned and walked slowly toward the exit.